Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the book of Jonah. We're in chapter 2 now. And we've seen from the beginning that God told Jonah, get up, go to Nineveh, and preach. He got up and went the other direction. And for the rest of chapter 1, it's all about crisis and praying and deliverance and praising God. Except it's not Jonah. So you get to chapter 2, and now it's his turn. He has a crisis, and he prays, and he's delivered, and he praises God. But there's also contrasts between these two chapters. As much as there's certain similarities, there's also certain contrast. On one side, Jonah was sleeping very peacefully in the bottom of the boat. Oh, right now he's very troubled in the bottom of the fish. When he was asked to pray, to be rescued from this storm by the mariners, he didn't. Now it's about his life. Oh, how he intercedes. Already we're seeing the narrative show us this is the heart of Jonah. He prays when it's about him. And there's more into this chapter that shows us something about his heart. Of course, we ask the question, why is this chapter here? Why is this prayer written down? You may answer, because Jonah prayed, so he wrote it down. Except, it's not the only time in a story that we're told somebody prays and it's not written down. And there's even certain stories that go from one side to the other. I think of Manasseh, right? Manasseh is crushed by God, and he repents and he prays to God. It says, but his prayer is never written down. Compared to his father, when he prays, his prayers are written down. So, why is this prayer of Jonah given to us? Can't forget these divine editors who put together this story for a specific reason. We know Jonah didn't write this in the belly of the fish. Come on. He wrote it much later, and even wrote it with some poetic license, Jewish poetic license. We see, because there's some repetition, they like to do that. He repeats a lot of the same words or synonyms. And there's also parallelism. He repeats the same idea, but said in a different way. There's, of course, another type of parallelism, which is contrasted. He brings up an idea, and then brings it up again later, but in a different way. There's also the fact that this prayer that he's writing down is clearly inspired by some of the Psalms. He's literally taking some of the expressions from other Psalms and puts it in here. So it's specific. Why? What is God trying to show us in this prayer? We're going to discover that together. It all starts with the end of chapter 1, or depending on your translation, the beginning of chapter 2. But we know it's the beginning of this part of the story, and it says, and the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. You can't miss how God told the fish what to do, and the fish did. Because again, it started by God told his prophet to do something, and he didn't. He told the storm to do something, and it did. He tells the fish to do something, it does. So nature obeys, but not the man of God. A man who would clearly state, I fear the Lord. So already we're seeing the contrast by the narrator, by the writer. They obey. What about Jonah? Now, the fact that he mentions that he was in there for 3 days and 3 nights, we know why. For the first readers, maybe it escaped them. They didn't have the New Testament yet. But we know. This is why Jesus says that the only sign he's going to give them is a sign of Jonah. The fact that he was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, he'll be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. It's all about Jesus. Everything's about Jesus. It's sad that we don't recognize that in modern Christianity. We make it about other things like ourselves and how to succeed. And really, every character, every teaching is all about Christ, the Word made flesh. It's put down here so that we can know the son of Jonah. So what does Jonah do in the belly of the fish? Then Jonah prayed. The Lord his God from the belly of the fish. He wouldn't pray before, but he will now. And we really got to focus on exactly what he says in his prayer. He prays the Lord his God. And you almost feel like it's a tongue-in-cheek by the writer. His God, yeah. The God that he fears, right? But I digress. Now he starts to pray, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and he heard my voice. Here's where the parallelism comes in, full speed ahead. Right? He called out to the Lord, he cried out to him. Two ways of saying the same thing. He was in distress, he was in the belly of Sheol, which is the end of death. Think of Psalm 23, right? Walk to the valley, the shadow of death. And some have said that it's not really death that's actually been there, it's more like really difficulty and distress, but eating in heavily on death. So we see the parallelism here. Plus, God heard him, right? And he answered me. And I said, another way, you heard my voice. So, he's in distress, he cries out to God. This probably referring to when he was drowning. And we'll see the rest of the prayers. It's that moment before the fish shows up. And this is what he went through and how he cried out to God. So, he continues. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Who cast him into the deep? God did. Wait, we read chapter 1. The mariners picked him up, and they're the one who threw him in the sea. But Jonah says, no, it was God. He even talks about how it was his billows, right? Your billows, your waves. God is beating on me. And these words, this imagery, should make us think of Psalm 83 and others like that talk of how God is pressing against them, striking them through trials after trial after trial, like waves, and it all comes from God, though. That's important to notice because we live in a day and age of Christianity where God is kind of there, but not sovereign. He's with us. He feels our pain. He tries to help, but everything is not of him, by him, and for him. No, it's the devil. It's life. Life happens. No, Jonah says, God threw me in the water. He's the one that struck me down by these waves. You recognize God was at work in these things. God doesn't just see what we're going through and try to be there for us. He's the one bringing them to accomplish his plans. Job doesn't say the devil struck my kids, killed my family, took my stuff, hit my health. No, he said, the Lord give it, the Lord take it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He recognized who was at work here. It's all about God. We need to be brought back to that, like Jonah is doing here. And again, we see the parallelism too. And he's cast into the deep. Where? The heart of the seas. It's the same way of saying this, the different ways of saying the same thing. But you can't miss this idea of this waves striking him and being surrounded by the flood. He's really pressed down. He's like being held by this difficulty that he's in. And he continues. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight. Yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. Don't miss it a repetition. He thought he was pushed away from the sight of the Lord. And what is his hope? To see the temple of the Lord. You can't miss that. And this idea of the temple of the Lord, we'll put in our pocket for later. This is one of those expressions that will be used differently in another time. Here he's talking about how his hope was to come back on land. And the Holy Temple is this place where God dwells. It's this place in Jerusalem where the sacrifices happen, where you're in relationship with God. That was the main place for it, for Israel. And he's still got hope that he's going to be there. Even though everything seems to be despairing. Even he felt like God was literally driving him away, or divorced him, actually, is the word there. How many times did God speak of divorce to his people because they're rebellious? He felt like that. He felt rejected by God. But he still has some kind of hope. He continues. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head. I hope you're seeing in all this image of being wrapped up and surrounded, this idea of preparation for like putting people in the grave. Think of Jesus. Taken down from the cross, and Joseph and others, Nicodemus, are wrapping him in clothes and then putting him in the sepulchre. Great. Jonah is using imagery to speak about how he really felt that was it. He was dead. Good as dead. No more hope for him. Yet there was still some hope, though. There's still some hope. But in what? At the roots of the mountain, I went down to land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord, my God. The Jews believed that the mountains had deeper roots, if you will, like a bottom part deep into the ground, and sometimes where there's water, like under the water even. That's what he means by the root of the mountains. And you can't miss this. This way it's expressed. It's really, I could say, anti Zionistic rejoicing. Anti Zionistic rejoicing. What are you talking about? In Psalms, multiple times where God's people was oppressed but then delivered, they speak about going up the mountain of Jerusalem to go to the temple, to rejoice that God had delivered them. So they ascend and they rejoice in what God did. But what's happened to Jonah? He's going down, right? He goes down back past the land, down into the water, down deeper than the mountain itself. Instead of going up the mountain, he's going down deep into the mountain, so deep that it's under the water even. That's really rejection. Like I said, anti rejoicing in God's triumph and going up to the mountain of Zion, which is where God is, in a sense. This is completely opposite of what he's going through right now. He felt locked up, right? The bars closed upon me. It was done for. Yet, but God brought him out. And yet, he really says, "O Lord, my God." He then continues by saying, "When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple." And we should be remembering the flood and Noah. And how when the water were all over the earth and the rain stopped, it says that God remembered Noah. What does Jonah say? I remembered the Lord. It's almost like you're listening to a record, shows how old I am, or whatever else you want to be, and there's like a skip in the song, a false note. You're like, what? You remember the Lord? Interesting. That the Lord remembers us, miserable creatures that harden our hearts. Especially he's the one that ran from God. When did he remember him? When he ran from him? When he went to sleep on the boat? When he didn't want to be brought back to shore? When? No, it's kind of boastful, but when do you remember the Lord? And the boast too continues, right? My prayer came to you into your holy temple. Now we're not just talking about the Jerusalem, we're talking about his Holy of Holies, his very presence. My prayers came to you. And he speaks with certainty. And you want to ask the question, on what are you basing this on? Why do you think that God absolutely would hear your prayers, Jonah? Is it your obedience? Because we saw it, it's not really there. No, he's gonna tell us actually. But first, those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. Here's another skip in the song. Now you must say, wait, why? It's true. Those who trust in idols should be rejected by God. Except, what's he doing in Jonah's song? Jonah's prayer. Who are the idolaters that he's about to go meet? Ninevites. Ninevites that we know in the end of chapter 30, he does not want them to taste God's mercy. He gets angry in chapter 4 because they did taste God's mercy. This is prefiguring. This is Jonah showing his true heart. He did not want mercy for Nineveh, for these idolaters, because he's better, right? But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. It sounds nice, right? Salvation belongs to the Lord. What piousness, what faith in God. But then the rest of what he's saying shows that, no, it's not about how God gives salvation. That's not how he merited it. He offers sacrifices. He keeps his vows. He deserves God's mercy compared to those idolaters. Except the writer, he wants us to see what is being said here and what happened in chapter 1. When those idolaters turned to Yahweh and they thanked him, offered sacrifices, and made vows. I hope you see it. Jonah says, nah, I deserve it because look at me. And God said, yeah, but look at them too. Look at them too. And one thing that should strike us to this point is there's no repentance in this prayer. Have you noticed that? He talks about his prayer really made it up to the holy temple. And God, of course, would deliver him. And it seems to be because of how faithful he is. But there's no place for him to confess his sins, to repent from his evil ways, to beg for pity, for mercy from God. There's no Psalm 32 or 51. No. This is all, I deserve it. Don't miss that. This is not good. This brings us, of course, to that last fateful moment. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. I like that it doesn't just say, and the fish vomited up Jonah. It takes time to tell us the Lord spoke to him. How did it start again? God spoke to Jonah, gave him orders, he didn't do it. He speaks to the fish does. Contrast, comparison. You're supposed to do that. Plus, the fish vomits him up. What a way of expressing it, right? Instead of just saying brought him to the lion and he got out, no, he vomited. God vomits those he rejects out of his mouth. There's imagery going on here. At some point, he's almost saying this is what I think of Jonah and his attitude. So, why is this prayer here? I think there's at least two main reasons. The one is we see how God was really striking at Jonah left and right. He was despairing of life and it didn't humble him. Again, no Psalm 32, Psalm 51 type of expressions here. No repentance, no confession, no brokenness over sins. No. Just God would hear me and deliver me, and that's it. And it's sad. It's sad because we have that same kind of attitude. We start by grace. We know that we don't deserve Christ died for us, and then right away we quickly fall into, but then I'm faithful and I obey, and of course God's gonna bless me. No, it remains grace, mercy, pity on God's part. No matter what good works you do, they're always tinted, infected by pride, by selfishness, by the flesh. No, the fact is, it's never perfect. It's never about meriting anything. It's always about grace and mercy. And recognizing that our whole life on earth is about hoping that the God of the universe, who's so holy, continues to be merciful to us as Christians because of Christ. And sometimes he brings these things into our life to humble us, to remind us it's not about because of you and how great you are. It's me. It's me. Which leads to the second point. How Jonah wants no mercy for the idolaters and how we can have that same heart. Look around to the unbelievers and say, oh, they're disgusting, they're wicked, they're evil. Look at this culture. And yes, it is sinful. But Paul told us in 1 Timothy chapter 2 that we should be praying for all men everywhere for their salvation. That includes the evil governments too, by the way. We're called to pray for our enemies, to love them like Christ did for us, his greatest enemies. Yeah, but they deserve judgment. So do we. So do we. And as much as we keep hoping for mercy and forgiveness and pity, we should pray and hope that for them as well. Don't be like Jonah here, but have his heart. I think this prayer is here to show us that's not the heart to have. And I hope it spoke to you, your brothers and sisters. Be blessed.